Hello everyone, and welcome to Biopedia. Today is Darwin Day again, and for the 5th time on this podcast, we're doing a special episode to commemorate it. However, I was struggling a bit for ideas with this one. After all, I didn't just want to do a section of Voyage of the Beagle again, as I'm sure part 3 will be a future episode at some point. However, inspiration struck from, I have to admit, a slightly unexpected angle. I was recently given a Doctor Who book specifically because it contained Charles Darwin as a central character, and well, my connection to biology and Charles Darwin is well known enough. So, I thought why not examine a little bit of how Charles Darwin is presented in this story. More specifically, whether the details of the story's location and timing are actually accurate. So, let's dive in. The story occurs when Darwin is present on the HMS Beagle, and it's 4 years into that ship's voyage. Darwin is, apparently, shown as being seasick. Now, I checked, and this is accurate. The Royal College of Surgeons mentions on its website that Darwin was afflicted with seasickness the entire way through the voyage. In the novella itself, the ship is in the Galapagos. Darwin is presented walking along the beach and finds a man sat on a chair on said beach. This is, obviously, the Doctor. Now, this is not a science fiction podcast, contrary to what you might have thought when you opened this episode. As such, we will not be going into the story itself. Suffice to say, Darwin finds a skull from a species that shouldn't be there. I am not a Doctor Who fan, but my sister tells me it's a species descended from dinosaurs on planet Earth. However, we will at this point look at some of the historical details. The year mentioned in the story is 1835, and we know it takes place in the Galapagos archipelago. Now, Charles Darwin himself mentions the Galapagos in chapter 17 of his Voyage of the Beagle. Suffice to say, though, he doesn't mention David Tennant wandering around. Who knows, maybe that got cut in the editing process. Anyway, the actual historical HMS Beagle arrives in the islands in September of 1835, the same year the story is placed. Now, the way the story is written seems to indicate that they have only just arrived in the Galapagos archipelago, so I'm going to say that it is meant to be taking place on September the 17th, when the Beagle first shows up at one of the islands. So far, so good. On the morning of the 17th, the Beagle landed on an island Darwin calls Chatham Island. We know that Darwin goes ashore here, as he does in the Doctor Who story, because he collects specimens. Now, what is this Chatham Island? Well, the individual islands of the Galapagos archipelago have both English and Spanish versions of their names. I know from personal experience that the Spanish names for the islands are the ones that stuck. This was pushed for by the man who founded the Ecuadorian Navy back in the day, and the Spanish names gradually replaced the older versions. However, Darwin, when writing Voyage of the Beagle, would have known the English versions of these names. So, Chatham Island refers to an island in the very east of the archipelago, and in the modern day is known as San Cristobal. This was named in 1684 by the navigator William Ambrose Cowley. It was most likely named after John Pitt, the son of Prime Minister William Pitt the Elder. This John Pitt was at the time the second Earl Chatham, hence the name, and First Lord of the Admiralty when the island was named. Interestingly enough, he would die while serving as Governor of Gibraltar in 1835, the same year the story takes place. As a final detail, Darwin introduces himself in the novella as Darwin from Shrewsbury. And indeed, he was born there in 1809, dying in Kent in 1882. So, as far as cursory examinations of this novella go, it seems historically accurate enough, at least when it comes to Darwin. I'll leave the discussions of potential aliens and/or Time Lords to a podcast of a different nature. All we need to know is that the story most likely takes place on Chatham Island, or San Cristobal, on the 17th of September 1835. Now, you might be thinking, what's the point in bringing any of this up? Well, if nothing else, the story serves as a fun little tangent as we celebrate Darwin Day. After all, as demonstrated by the Doctor himself being somewhat speechless when he meets Darwin, Charles Darwin's immortalisation in this novella highlights the impact he has had and the fame he has won through the centuries. That brings us to the end of today's episode. As always, thank you all for listening. Feel free to get in touch with the show's email address for any questions, comments, or topic suggestions for future episodes. Until next time, have a great week, everyone.